Okay, I remember what.
I'm gonna laugh when that falls.
If that falls, it's not going to. But
If that falls, you put glitter in your hair.
that's fine.
Yes.
It's not gonna fall.
You gotta shake on it. You gotta stand up. Hands up, and everything stand
Oh,
down.
I don't want to.
Okay.
Done.
There you go. If it doesn't fall, you gotta put glitter in your hair.
No.
No, that's the deal.
No.
That was part of the deal.
No, it wasn't.
Yes, it was. No, it wasn't. It was part of the
You
deal.
mentioned it after.
Wow.
There's no consequences for him. Only consequences.
You know.
It's more likely it's not gonna fall.
Exactly.
Are you guys ready?
No, we gotta just
give me
do
one
one
sec.
thing. So just change it to the block file, and then just put it at the bottom.
Yeah, do you-
I'm gonna put it with what it goes.
Put it under a very specific thing.
Putting it under A2.
Just specify that it's a very specific scenario. Most likely won't be this, right? Most likely it doesn't specific people who keep acting up on it.
Oh, so you're con second, pro first, is that?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's definitely not gonna die before the end of this round.
You like bring this one. Bring this one, and it literally just looks like this.
Why is why?
No, it literally looks like you're like bring this up in something, bro. Bring this up in front of you.
What color would you dye your hair if it falls?
Yeah, which
You should do a bright pink and get a buzz.
Yes. Yeah.
Like pink with a buzz.
Like pink with a buzz.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
Wait,
Get away with that. Or like a deep
I
purple.
thought I just had a deep purple.
Honestly, a bleach buzz would
Buzz cut, bleach, and then wear those big round glasses.
Yes. You already got the glasses. You already just make them round.
I know I got I
Yes,
don't
you
want
should.
the round glasses.
Well, you look dumb regardless.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
For speaker on app, what's your name?
Thanks to Larry.
And then for speaker Nick.
Brooks Speedy.
Yo, let's go. I came prepared.
Yeah.
Why would I do that when I can have this sick photo?
You fucking need
Yeah, you should be calling Twitter summary for anything in case we really need to say something about how it is. I also have and also sure the red line. Okay, so good. Are you situated with your mic?
I think
In general, absolutely.
Okay, well, we'll have to about this.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys ready? Judge, you all set up?
Yeah, I'm gonna eat if y'all are cool with that.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I have like 20 seconds left. If I'm speaking now, it'll be a mess. I actually don't need that. Can you just like set up a floor for me? Just make sure there's nothing on the other side of the page. Start time starts speaking. You're doing a real great job. She dropped my pencil and my paper. Time starts when I start speaking. We affirm the resolution. Our contention is transitioning away from the strategy of counterterrorism. Prior to the adoption of great power competition or GPC, the detrimental strategy of counterterrorism was most widely in usage. The ECNL describes the problems of counterterrorism, writing that the adoption of security measures to counterterrorism and violent extremism has resulted in the restriction of civic freedoms which are key to civil society. Furthermore, the United Nations explains that in recent years, the measures adopted by states to counter terrorism have themselves posed serious challenges to human rights and the rule of law. Some states have engaged in torture and other ill treatment to counter terrorism, while the legal and practical safeguards available to prevent torture, such as regular independent monitoring of detention centers, have often been disregarded. And most importantly, the war on terror enabled the U.S. to justify its actions to declare war on Afghanistan and Iraq. These wars are clear and concise evidence of the impacts that occur above. The Watson Institute 21 quantifies these impacts as they state that 92% of Afghan families have food insecurity and 3 million children face acute malnutrition, and nearly 243,000 people have been killed in the Afghan conflict. But the horrendous toll doesn't stop there. The Watson Institute informs us there have been more than 180,000 Iraqi civilians killed by direct violence since the U.S. invasion, but states that the actual number of civilians killed by direct and indirect war violence is unknown or likely much higher. In addition, the infrastructure damage left by America has stopped thousands of civilians from being able to access basic needs. GBC leads to a shift from counterterrorism. Indeed, the Congressional Research 22 writes that the emergence over the past decade of intensified U.S. competition with the PRC and Russia has profoundly changed the conversation about U.S. defense issues from what it was during the post-Cold War era. Counter-terrorist operations and U.S. military operations in the Middle East, which have been more at the center of discussions of the U.S. following the terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, are now less prominent element in the conversation. The conversation now focuses more on elements which largely relate to China and to Russia. This is significant because it means that GBC provides the U.S. an alternative strategy to counterterrorism that allows a more efficient, moral, democratic way of making decisions regarding diplomacy, the economy, and the military. The impact is live. By shifting away from the strategy of counterterrorism, GBC is helping to improve the lives of millions of people by reducing human rights violations like torture and upholding democratic principles. Our second contention is foreign aid. In the status quo, GBC has led to major increases in the foreign aid provided to underdeveloped nations. Natsios 20 explains that in order to protect their interests, control the influence of rival superpowers, and create more allies, the U.S., Russia, and China provided millions of dollars of aid annually in sectors such as agriculture, education, infrastructure, and health in underdeveloped countries. Additionally, Natsios provides a timeline writing that this aid was provided not only in the Cold War era, but also present day. Furthermore, Isaacson 22 writes that the effects of GBC's foreign aid have also spread to Latin America, with the U.S., Russia, and China making major investments in the region and attempting to reduce long-time concerns like drugs, organized crime, and terrorism. In addition, Ferretti and Bektish 21 state that the U.S. GBC can also help Middle Eastern nations such as Afghanistan through the market of rare earth and critical minerals, which is necessary to reduce Chinese dependence because such a strategy will ensure Afghanistan does not return to a failed state and ensure that the U.S. has a reliable source of the critical mineral lithium. What this all means is that as a result, GBC underdeveloped nations all around the world are and will continue to be aided in ways that greatly support them and help to improve the lives of citizens. This is quantified by USAID, who writes that since 2008, USAID's efforts in 25 priority countries have helped save the lives of 4.6 million children and 200,000 women. In 2016, USAID helped 82 million women access essential health services, and that in 2015, over 12 million children under 5 were reached with USG-supported nutrition programs. Moreover, Macaulay 20 explains that China has aided more than $350 billion in grants and loans that supported approximately 4,300 projects across 138 countries and territories. This evidence shows that billions of dollars the U.S., China, and Russia spend on foreign aid are in fact helping to support developing nations and their citizens, affirmed to improve the quality of lives and save lives.
Results. The United States strategy of great power competition produces more benefits than harms. Contention 1. Military conflict. America's strategy of GBC is dangerous. The term great power competition was first defined in 2017 when the United States outlined their national security strategy, saying that they would be focused on their competitors, Russia and China. This is a concern since historically the United States strategy of competition with Russia has led to millions of deaths and destruction in smaller countries. The Vietnam War, a proxy war between the United States and Russia, was escalated due to the Cold War and the two countries' competition for global power at the time, as shown by Hardy 22 and AE 22. And DOE 21 finds that around 2 million civilians were killed in North and South Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The U.S.'s methods of warfare have also destroyed their country, as the Minute 22 shows that U.S. planes dumped 20 million gallons of herbicides to defoliate Viet Cong hiding places, decimating 5 million acres of forest and 500,000 acres of farmland. These harmful acts of competition have continued past the Cold War. March 22 says that the United States has pushed policies toward Ukraine that Putin sees as a threat. The Biden administration was unwilling to eliminate the threat through diplomacy in 2021, recommitted the United States to bring Ukraine into NATO. Putin responded to this by invading Ukraine. The harms of this conflict are felt mostly by Ukraine. US 22 states that the tens of thousands of people were killed in the Ukraine war and that there are 6 million refugees in Ukraine. The destruction to Ukraine's economy amounted to $113 billion, and the minimum money needed for recovery is over $200 billion. USNI 22 shows that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has intensified US and NATO concerns about the threat of Russian military action against the Baltic states. Baltic states have been seeking to build up their military capabilities, but their forces remain small and their capabilities limited. The ultimate impact of this is destruction of countries who are unable to combat these conflicts. If the U.S. continues to use the strategy of GBC, we can see the damage done in Vietnam and Ukraine occur across the Baltic states, leaving millions dead and even billions of dollars to fix. Contention 2, trade war with China. The United States is in a trade war with China, one that threatens America's economy. The United States attempts to compete with China prompted the trade war, as Basag 22 finds that the U.S.-China trade war is a tool for the rivalry between great powers. Washington's goal was to keep its advantage in industry and service sectors while offering domestic business better protection schemes and more symmetrical access to the Chinese market. However, Durant 22 finds that the trade war has not yet yielded any benefits for U.S. firms and workers, and while the U.S. tariffs were intended to protect American industries, they have actually hurt the U.S. economy. This trade war is already harming the United States market as Durant 22 continues. Retaliatory tariffs from China caused total U.S. exports to fall by 9.9%. Miriam Minnie and her co-authors similarly identified a 10% increase in tariffs caused by the value of U.S. exports to climb by $32 billion, costing U.S. firms about $2.4 billion per month in lost exports. And this trade war spells out dire consequences for our country's future. These sanctions also led to an exacerbation of poverty rates, as Driscoll 17 states that U.S. sanctions led to an average of 3.8% increase in the poverty gap. Sanctions also failed to achieve their aims, 65 to 95% of the cases in which they are imposed, and it is the poorest that suffer rather than the elites that they target. And this trade war worked to harm the overall GDP, as O'Driscoll also states that a quantitative analysis of UN and US sanctions find that they have an average decrease of the target's annual real capita GDP growth of over 2 percentage points. These effects last for a period of 10 years and lead to a decline of the country's GDP per capita of 25.5%. The ultimate impact is the economic collapse in the United States, as 2 consecutive quarters of decline in gross domestic product constitute a recession, as stated by Anderson 22. We can look at our last recession. We can see the harms of this. Duncan 22 states that millions of people lost their homes, jobs, savings, and American households lost an estimated $16 trillion of net worth. GBC will bring an economic downturn, decrease the GDP, increase poverty and unemployment, and ultimately lead to a major slump in the United States economy, leading to a recession. Thus, you should vote nay.
Yep, you guys ready? First question.
Yes.
So firstly, starting with your point on military conflict and specifically the Ukraine crisis, can you just clarify a little bit about how Biden's and like the U.S.'s great power competition caused the Ukraine crisis to happen?
Yes, so the United States pushed policies towards Ukraine that Putin saw as a threat, and in 2021, we recommitted the United States to bringing Ukraine into NATO, and this is what prompted Putin to invade.
Are those democratic policies, or what kind of policies specifically is the U.S. pushing on Ukraine?
I mean, if you want to see the part, it just says the United States has pushed policies towards Ukraine that Putin sees as a threat,
Okay.
and trying to get them to join NATO.
Okay. All right.
Do you have another question?
Sorry, say it again. Say what you said?
Do you have another question?
You can go ahead.
Okay. So, on your second condition of foreign aid, would you say that all foreign aid is good?
I'd say that foreign aid is a net positive.
Okay. And what time period would that be?
Um,
Short term, long term?
I'd say that depending on the type of foreign aid and what it's used for, it can have both short-term and long-term benefits.
Okay. Another question?
Yeah, sure. So when you talked about, so the intention to start a trade war with China was this. So you said caused by GPC, but then also to further U.S. business interests, or can you like just sort of restate that?
I mean, it was caused by our competition with China.
Okay.
And so the United States competition with China is what prompted this trade war, and the U.S. trying to gain an edge on them.
Okay, so if like we weren't using GPC, the U.S. would it like how would that have stopped? Like the U.S. sort of started the trade war, let's just say for GPC, but then also to support U.S. business interests, right? Which is what you said. Well, that was their attempt. Was
To gain an interest, or sorry, not to gain an interest, to get above China, try and compete with them and get a leg above them.
Okay.
Makes sense. So on your first contention, you said that you mentioned a lot of wars and stuff. How are those wars caused by GPC?
So they're. Do you mean avoided by GPC or?
Well, didn't you say that, or I stated a whole bunch of wars would happen in the U.S. Caused those to happen? How is that specifically GPC?
So my point was the U.S.'s counterterrorism policy is what. Wait, let me just find it. So this is from the United Nations, is that the war on terror enabled the U.S. to justify its actions and declare war on Afghanistan and Iraq. So those are the kind of wars I'm talking about. Like the war on terror was caused by the U.S.'s counterterrorist policies of.
Is the counterterrorist policies GBC specific then?
So because we started to use, because GPC became more prevalent, the talks about to Afghanistan and Iraq shifted onto bigger countries such as Russia and China to more directly compete with them. And that's time.
Are you gonna take up or are you ready to go?
Good, you ready? Okay. Time will start on my first one. Okay. One of my opponent's major contentions was the Russia-Ukraine war. However, the BBC 22 states that Russia says the West's refusal to recognize new territory seized from Ukraine made peace talks harder. As my opponent mentioned, the U.S. seemed unwilling to engage in peace talks. President Joe Biden indicated he would be ready to meet Vladimir Putin as soon as Putin was willing to not illegally annex a sovereign land of a sovereign state. Additionally, they say that President Biden told reporters on Thursday night that he was ready to meet the Russian leader if there was an actual interest in him deciding to end the war, as opposed to attempting to, again, illegally annex land of a sovereign state. They also talk briefly about the climate. However, competitions between countries has a positive effect on the climate. Rathi22 writes, a transition to climate competition between the United States and China might not hold back progress rather than work with China on climate change. The United States and other developed countries should compete on everything from better EV batteries to more affordable solar panels. They also talk largely about trade war. However, GPC leads to economic benefits from investment. Forrest 22 found that the appropriations from the Chips and Science Act, an explicit attempt by the United States government to compete with China that was passed into law over the summer, would contribute around $287 billion to US GDP. Meanwhile, Goldberg 20 examined the impacts of the ongoing trade war between the US and China, fueled by protectionist policies implemented by Beijing and Washington. He found that after accounting for the tariff revenue gains to domestic procedures that aggregate annually to a real income loss of 7.2 billion, or less than 0.5% of our GDP, which is not nearly as much as it benefits us. As I previously stated, that the benefits from exclusively the Chips and Science Act is much more beneficial than the annual loss from tariffs relating to the ongoing trade war. Additionally, international foreign aid, as a result of great power tension, causes tremendous economic gains. Natios 20 explains that in order to protect the interests, control the influence of rival superpowers, as well as to create more allies, U.S., Russia, and China have provided billions of dollars in aid to developing countries. I know that one of the topics that my opponents mentioned is proxy conflicts and how smaller countries are negatively impacted by GPC, but this is incorrect. This is factually incorrect, as an organization like NATO, which is a solely GBC-related organization, protects these smaller countries. My opponents give the example of the Baltic states, but the Baltic states are members of NATO, so any attempt by Russia or another power to affect or attack these countries would trigger Article 5 of NATO, which would bring the United States involved, which is a heavy deterrence for countries like Russia to get involved. As is common knowledge, the United States military is the strongest in the world, so it would not be in Russia's best interest to attack a state like the Baltic. This is also occurring in Eastern Asia, with with continued talks about Eastern Asian alliances. So China would be in a similar position to that of Russia, and would not be encouraged to attack these smaller nations at risk of bringing into conflict with the United States. This is why you need to affirm the resolution today.
We say funny.
Bless you.
Just give me a second. For a quick off-time roadmap, I'll be defending my case from their rebuttal, and then I'll be going over. Okay. Time will start my first word. Okay, so for our first contention, they stated that NATO protects these foreign countries. However, they provide little evidence they don't provide any evidence saying that NATO protects these countries. I could be wrong, but they said that they are not part of NATO. So there would be no part. You said
I did.
okay, they are not part of NATO, meaning that there is no incentive for them to protect these countries because they are not part of NATO. Next, they say that green tech has a benefit of climate to our that it destroys the country of Vietnam. However, lithium battery production has known to produce like toxic gases, so that's overruled. They said that Joe Biden would be willing to negotiate to stop the war. However, he caused the war in the first place, and he's caused the damage that is happening now. Him working to stop the damage that has already been done just shows how the strategy of GPC is ineffective, as it causes wars and then tries to backpedal on them once they are already happening and once people have already been hurt. Next, they state that foreign aid helps economies of other countries. Again, I can read and study for this. A high proportion of foreign aid is in the form of loans, which cripple countries and through accumulation of debt. High debt puts countries at risk of default. Elliott 18 reports that 40% of all low-income countries are on the brink of defaulting on debt. PBS reports that the last Asian debt crisis, Indonesia's default loan, pushed 80 million people into poverty. Aid is harming these countries. Aid is causing bad things to these countries, and aid is leading to harm to these countries. That leads me to my addressing of their second contention, because it links to this one, which is foreign aid. They state that foreign aid provides help to the underdeveloped countries and that it helps all these countries. However, Keon 12 finds that an increase in U.S. food aid increases the incidence, onset, and duration of armed civil conflicts in recipient countries because small armed groups steal the resources and use them to fund conflict. Keon points out how aid's instrumental role in starting the First and Second Congo Wars, which have 5.5 million deaths. This outweighs the statistics that they state for how many lives they are saving. As I stated, they are saving 4.5 million, or 4.6 million lives. They also, Musu 21 continues that the exploitation of foreign aid can exacerbate contentions in ethnically divided countries, leading to the onset of ethnic war, like the one in Sri Lanka that killed upwards of 100,000 people. Even if aid is not the root of the conflict, Narang 14 continues that high levels of aid can divert
local resources towards the war effort and away from people, giving governments more ability to prolong the war. Empirically, this increases the length of wars by 12%. This means that aid is harming these countries and causing millions of deaths in them, exacerbating the tensions of war and ultimately causing the harms to these countries. This leads me back to my first contention, where we see that they believe that the implementation and the moving away from terrorism and the moving away from the focus on terrorism is reducing the amount of deaths. However, the U.S.'s history of GPC seen through the Cold War, they staged many coups in many smaller countries, like many Latin American countries, which are now completely and economically destroyed by these, leading to deaths and leading to economic failure. These countries were destroyed because of GPC and because of these policies that were implemented by GPC. And these policies have not changed, as they have already exacerbated tensions in Ukraine, as we've already shown. We have staged coups, we have led to the collapse of economies, and we are causing the destruction of the economies, which is much worse than the death from terrorism. Great power competition has morphed into a militarized global doctrine used to justify interventions from around the world to for wars. Oh, sorry. That was just a quote. Back up. Thank you.
Mine, are you ready for the question?
Oh, yeah.
Judge, are you ready for the crossfire?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. May I have the first question?
Okay.
Okay. I wanted to question your point about Joe Biden causing the war in Ukraine. What did you mean when you said that?
I meant not that Joe Biden caused the war in Ukraine, but that the American policies implemented have caused the war in Ukraine, specifically NATO going in.
Ukraine's not a member of NATO.
I know. They were attempting to get him. They were attempting to make Ukraine a member of NATO. Russia did not like that. Caused a conflict.
So should the United States abandon a foreign policy goal solely because one country, being Russia, declared an unjust war to illegally annex territory of a sovereign state?
I believe they should work to find a better solution to that.
Okay, do you have any propositions for a better solution?
That's a counterpoint. I can't state that.
I also had a question about your, which one was it? Ethnic war. You said that aid causes ethnic war. What is the correlation there?
I can find my card. A high proportion of aid, exploitation of foreign aid can exacerbate tensions in ethnically divided countries, leading to the onset of ethnic war, like the one in Sri Lanka.
So it doesn't create ethnic conflict. It can just potentially, not always, but potentially cause increased rifts between ethnicities.
It has historically shown to, in ethnically divided countries, which a lot of smaller countries are ethnically divided countries, it has been shown to cause ethnic wars due to tensions from the aid.
Okay. Do you have any questions?
Could you elaborate on your competing with China, the number? Through competing with China, whatever policy that was that allowed for billions of dollars?
Yes. So I stated that the CHIPS and Science Act, which was directed and attempted by the U.S. government to compete with China, would add around $287 billion to the U.S. economy. However, you mentioned tariffs, but tariffs only lose about $7.2 billion. So, very clearly, that $287 billion is significantly more drastic. So competition.
Could you explain that act? Sorry, could you explain the act that you were talking about that would provide the money?
The CHIPS and Science Act?
Yeah.
You want me to explain it?
How would it provide this money?
It's basically incentivizes domestic manufacturers of things like computer chips and advanced technologies, which are currently being manufactured in places like China, to return to the U.S., which would directly increase the economy by creating more jobs, but also having more.
But have we seen this growth yet? Have we seen them gain money yet, or is it just
The act was just recently passed. It was passed over the summer.
time? All right.
questions?
I'll stop thinking.
We won't take it off your
Yeah, just head up. You guys all talk about it.
Yes.
Where do you go to school? Myers, nice.
North back.
North Back.
Yep, site can be reached. That's cool. Very cool.
Did your docs not work offline?
What?
Did the docs not work offline?
I'm trying to find a thing and another doc that I didn't have open because I didn't think I needed it. And well, turns out I needed it. So let's just reload that. Nope. Okay.
So like I'm cool. Y'all can either like both steel prep or neither. So whatever y'all want.
Are you okay with running prep since it's your time?
Like no, you don't have to run the clock. Just like wait till the internet comes
Oh,
back.
sorry.
And until then,
Yeah.
That was my mistake.
This is good.
because like I can't flow right now either because I also lost internet.
Yeah.
Y'all have internet again?
Okay, mine's still on. I should probably stop speaking. Reload button.
Okay, yeah. Once you have your stuff back, then start your prep or start your speech or wherever you're at.
Because mine is still on.
Yeah,
Just
no
trying to
worries.
You can if you want to, I know. Okay, I'll start the time again. So we use 34 seconds of prep. Okay, so a bit of an off-time roadmap. I'm going to start with our case and summarize, reiterate our points, and then rebut their rebuttals, and then I'll move on to their case and just summarize what my opponent said in his rebuttal, and then I'll use the rest of the time I have for weighing. Sorry, the rest of To reiterate our first contention that GPC leads to a transitioning away from counterterrorism. Counterterrorism is the adoption of security measures to counter terrorism and violent extremism. This has resulted in the restriction of civic freedoms, which are key to society. This has led to the war on terror, which enabled the U.S. to justify its actions and declare war on Afghanistan and Iraq. Our second contention regarding foreign aid is foreign aid leads to increase. GPC leads to an increase in foreign aid, which is the U.S., Russia, and China providing billions of dollars annually in sectors such as agricultural, education, infrastructure, and underdeveloped countries, which has helped millions of people around the world. Now, to our first, to what they said about how foreign aid does not significantly help countries, does not help countries. The U.S. Global Leadership Coalition 16 writes that over the past 40 years, trade has tripled as a share of our economy, with half of U.S. exports now going to developing countries. Foreign aid has laid the groundwork for mutually beneficial trading relationships. 11 of America's top 15 partners were once recipients of U.S. foreign aid.
Moreover, Morgan writes that as a result of foreign aid in 2013, 767 million people, 10% of the world's population, lived on less than $1.90 a day, well below the poverty line. This is a drastic improvement from the 1.85 billion in 1990, and the number has gotten significantly better over the years. Finally, the Council on Foreign Relations themselves writes that the U.S. foreign aid is a far-reaching economic and development aid that helped rebuild Europe after World War II, humanitarian aid in Africa, and more recently, military and development aid in Afghanistan. Only a few places in the world haven't felt the influence of U.S. aid in some way. This is significant because it proves that foreign aid, and specifically U.S. foreign aid, has been helping hundreds of nations and citizens all throughout the world. Now, my opponent's rebuttal said their responsibility to conflict that NATO is one of the specific ways that we can protect with that. They said that we didn't provide, we provide little evidence, so here's another piece of evidence. NATO 22 says that NATO's essential and enduring process to safeguard the freedom and security of all its members. This protects countries like the Baltics, like Finland, and Poland from special military operations from Russia. Moving on to weighing. Firstly, magnitude. So we weigh on magnitude because we affect more lives of people. Our foreign aid improves the lives of hundreds of millions of people around the world, including the 10% of the world's population whose income has raised above the poverty line. We also weigh on magnitude because our actions in the Middle East, or previous actions before moving to a strategy of GPC, affected hundreds of thousands of lives there. Moving on to scope. Our global aid affects hundreds of countries around the world. China, for instance, has funded over 138 countries in different ways. Therefore, we urge you to negate the resolution. Or no, affirm the resolution, sorry.
First, I'm going to be defending our case, then I'll be moving on to my opponents, and lastly, I will be weighing. And time will start on my first word. So, on our first contention of military conflict, my opponents have stated many times that NATO protects the Baltics. However, we have seen in Ukraine where the U.S., which is a part of NATO, has tried to help defend against the war, but people have still died. Even though NATO and the U.S. are trying to help these countries and could help them, people are going to still die, which is irreversible. And these people are dead. Even if you can help reduce the deaths, it still is people dead, and without GPC, these wars would not happen. So, also on our second contention of trade war, my opponents have stated that tariffs lose less. However, we have, tariffs lose less, and that helps a lot in the economy. However, this is just potential benefits. We give examples of in the past foreign trade war hurting us currently reducing, and they give this potential thing that could maybe help that is not guaranteed. So now onto my opponent's case. On the first contention of transition away from the counterterrorism, we stated that U.S. history staged coups which destroyed economies, and they did not give any rebuttal to this. Not only that, we also stated that this caused economic collapse in these countries, and what my partner stated in rebuttal, what he meant by economics is worse than the terrorist says, is that this economic collapse caused more people to die in these countries than the little amount of deaths that come from these terrorist attacks. Now, onto their second condition of foreign aid. As my partner stated in rebuttal, most foreign aid is debt. It increases conflicts, which cause millions of Congo deaths. It causes ethnic wars, and it diverts resources. My opponent's rebuttal to this is that the U.S. helps these countries, and it has been shown to help. However, that is simply not true when when 40% of all low-income countries are on the brink of defaulting on debt from this aid. Not only that, places like China and Russia, who also give out a lot of aid, as my opponent stated, are not doing it ethically and are preying on these countries, leading them to actually more economic downturn. So overall, we outweigh on irreversible deaths from proxy wars, because even though you can, with GBC, because irreversible deaths and these people dying in these proxy wars, they cannot come back. Death is irreversible. And we also outweigh the probability, since we give many historical examples of economy and deaths, while my opponent's main thing against my second contention is just a potential benefit that has not been proven correct. Thus, we urge you to vote nay.
Judge, you ready for cross?
Yeah.
Okay, guys, ready?
Yes.
May I have the first question? Sure. So you mentioned previously how the United States performed coups in Latin America during the Cold War, and you relate that to the barbaric practice of counterterrorism. How do you see the connection between coups in Latin America during the Cold War to the more recent counterterrorist efforts in the Middle East?
We're saying that GPC, these these coups staged are from GPC. They all stem from Cold War and the efforts to fight Russia. They are part of GPC. That's how GPC is historically shown these harms.
Wasn't that also an attempt by the U.S. to spread democracy to other countries? So are you saying that, like, we shouldn't be spreading democracy to these countries?
No, we're saying that we should do it in a way that is not causing economic destruction.
So could that economic destruction be, reduced, even minimized by this foreign aid? I know you said that foreign aid is often dead, but you said it yourself that this is a predatory practice by Russia and China, and that the United States and the rest of the West has not been engaging in this?
No, we said
I just stated that there's, I never stated that the U.S. doesn't also do
So then what did you say there?
So I said that most foreign aid is debt and that it is predatory, and that you mentioned that major players, the U.S., China, and Russia, all give out major amounts of aid, and most of this aid is all debt and actually predatory on these countries.
But could that aid not be useful?
What do you mean? If
Like,
it's-
does the aid actually benefit the people living in the country, at least at the very least short term? Do the people living there benefit from the aid?
I would argue that long-term destruction is more important than short-term.
But does it help?
But isn't long-term destruction more important?
But does it help? That's like my.
in some cases it has
does not
seen
matter if it
some
helps.
benefits. However, in many cases, which we have stated, it has caused deaths, it has caused wars, and most is predatory, which means even if it's short-term gains in some countries, in the long term, it will ultimately lead to
We've
death.
also demonstrated how in long term countries will benefit from U.S. and even other countries' aid.
It also increases conflict. I would assume wars that which lead to
How
irreversible
does
deaths.
foreign aid increase wars?
We've already stated.
We've already stated it multiple times how it caused Congo wars and deaths, and it causes ethnic wars in different places, and it diverts resources.
Okay, and then so once again, so you were talking about how NATO doesn't protect Ukraine. Well, because the whole point is NATO had joined Ukraine at the time, and if Ukraine was a part of NATO, they would have been protected, and it's extremely unlikely that Russia would have invaded
Well, I
Ukraine.
never stated.
The whole reason Russia invaded Ukraine is because Ukraine or NATO attempted to reach out to become part of NATO.
So if we left Ukraine alone, if we left Russia alone, you're saying that Russia would never have invaded Ukraine to expand its own territorial borders.
We are saying that the Ukraine conflict caused right now, in large part, is due to the U.S.'s efforts to get it into NATO.
Time. I hit the twice. Okay, it's not 3 times, it's twice. Okay, we're gonna use the rest, 2 minutes, 2 minutes and 26 seconds.
Yeah, it's about 26.
Yeah, bring your Chromebook because you gotta read this stuff. Start when you're ready. Maybe you have some pressed out. Using your pressure to get a drink.
I gotta have make sure my voice is prepared.
I'm sorry about that.
Yeah, sorry.
I think you're good.
Alright. Okay, Judge, I'm going to start by giving a brief off-time rundown, and then I will move into mine. Okay, so I'm going to start by addressing, by talking about our case and some of the points they didn't properly counter or properly rebut, and then I'm going to move on to their case and some of the areas where they are either incorrect or seemingly misled before I move on to weighing. Okay. Time starts now. So our opponent didn't properly address our contention of counterterrorism. They related coups in Latin America during the Cold War to counter-terrorist efforts, as I believe that is what they attempted to do, though I really do not see the connection. And additionally, these coups, while they may have had potentially negative side effects, they came from the point of spreading democracy. Their goal was to spread democracy, which is a moral and net positive system of governance. Additionally, my the opponent didn't properly address how foreign aid is negative. They mentioned debt briefly and how a lot of foreign aid is debt, but as my partner has previously said, a lot of foreign aid the United States government has created some of our major trading partners. I believe it was 11 out of the 15 largest trading partners of the United States have been previously recipients of foreign aid. This can be seen seen historically. Now to move on to some weighing, I'm going to talk about time frame and magnitude. So time frame is essentially when is it happening? Is it happening in the future? Is it happening now? And GPC is currently happening. We are right now engaging in GPC with China and with Russia. So it would take deliberate and direct action to shift away from GPC. And while that action could be used to do more beneficial things for our country and for the world, like fighting climate change, like doing all these things that we do need to do, and we don't need to waste time on switching from GPC to a potential alternative. I will also talk about magnitude, where magnitude is defined as how bad it is. And in this case, it's not how bad is it, it's how good is it. GPC is a good thing for not just the United States and not just our allies, but for the world as a whole. As I previously stated, issues like climate change and the fight against climate change are significantly helped via GPC. And there are a lot of net positives to GPC that drastically outweigh some of the potential downsides. This is why you need to affirm the resolution today.
Okay, we'll just take your answer.
Good.
And the rest of our stuff is minute 40, or minute 38, I believe. Yeah. Is that all? Yeah, this is sort of. Okay. Okay. So for a quick off-time roadmap, I will be addressing my case and sort of covering my case, covering their case, and then
covering our responses to their case in that way. So on the first contention, they say that we've stated that the Baltic states are not protected by NATO, and so an invasion is likely. The invasion will cause many deaths and it will cause the harms of many lives. GPC has caused this, and while they have stated that NATO might protect it, it is not part of NATO, so there's no guarantee. But mainly, what I want to focus on is the harm that that GDP has caused to smaller countries. While they state that it has given aid, it has 40% of that is predatory, and it has also caused wars, causing millions of deaths, 5.5 million deaths in just the Congo war alone. These significant harms outweigh the point of foreign aid, because if most of it is predatory, it is ultimately going to harm them in the long term. This is the main contention that they focus on and that they weigh down on is foreign aid. However, most of it is predatory, and most of it has seen wars, and most of it has led to deaths. While there might be some benefits, those benefits, ultimately 40% of them, and the 40% of them are predatory, and in the long term, they will lead to collapse. Now, as we move on, they state that the coups are they misunderstand what we were talking about counterterrorism and how the coups relate. The coups are an effort by GPC. They are former forms of GPC. That is how they relate. We are basically saying that these disadvantages are also happening. Finally, we outweigh on probability, because the probability of economic recession is much more likely than the potential benefit that this solution provides, and also irreversibility. The deaths and the economic collapse and the more deaths caused from the efforts of foreign aid ultimately are leading to millions of deaths, which is, it's irreversible. That's not.
Jeff?
I have comments and then I can give the decision if you want.
Sure.
Okay. Just give me like 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Did you all say that? I may have just misheard, but I believe you said that Baltics aren't part of NATO.
Well, I was confused by what you were saying.
Yeah, I
since
think you said they weren't part
I
of
think I misunderstood. Because we
They
were just
are.
talking about,
I'm
like-
sorry if I made it
Oh,
seem like they are, but they are.
Because I asked you and you said that they weren't.
I think you asked me if
I think it got kind of confused.
Yeah, I think it was just a miscommunication at the time. That's on me.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Okay, so, four main things it comes down to. You have Ukraine, you have the trade war, you have counterterrorism, and then foreign aid. Just like moving forward in PF, I would recommend collapsing on an argument, just so you're not having to cover every single point. Yeah, just something to think about. So starting on Ukraine and the idea of proxy wars, I think Neg's ahead here. Just because the NATO argument, the NATO defense didn't really make sense to me. I think yeah, a global power conflict or whatever is definitely the reason for war in Ukraine. Whether it's Joe Biden's fault or whatever, you have some arguments about that. But I think at the end of the day, they're ahead there, and they do extend the impacts of the deaths in Ukraine. So I give them offense there. Then for trade war, no one really goes for anything here. It was kind of messy. I'm not really left with anything big. I'm not giving anyone offense there. Then counterterrorism, I still don't understand how GPC is I don't get where you're coming from of you need to affirm the resolution because global power conflict takes us away from counterterrorist efforts when global power conflict is what led to conflict in the Middle East and in the coups that they're talking about in South Africa. So just because I didn't understand your warranting, I don't give you impacts there. And then the last one, foreign aid, I think Neg's ahead here as well, where they give me a quantifiable, they give me a warrant of it's really bad for developing countries because it's predatory and causes debt, and when debt is caused, that leads to things like ethnic wars, at least the deaths. Clear warrant there, clear impact. So I'm voting off of the foreign aid turn and Ukraine. So ultimately vote Neg, but really good round.
Cool. Thank you. Good job. Yeah.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, just email me.
Do you have any like
Yeah.
personal tips or something for speaking?
Okay, so for a little more, like, have you heard the term line by line? So basically, when you're giving a rebuttal, like, you did great. It was really good. Both were really good speeches. Same with you. But going down an opponent's case, literally, I just want, okay, here's what they say. Here's their first sentence. Here's our response. Here's their second sentence. Here's our response. If you go line by line, then as soon as they try to extend their case through that, I can just say, okay, well, they're not interacting with the arguments. I'm not giving them anything there. So if you go line by line, that's going to make sure that they don't get any offense. Which you did a pretty good job. The 4 and 8 term was really good. Yeah, y'all were really prepped. Summary, you need to crystallize the round more. You could have dropped trade wars. You spent time on that you didn't need. Because yeah, exactly. So like literally, you could have not talked about your case at all. Talked about 4 and 8, and still won the round. It just gives you more time to explain your argument. Because realistically, no one got anything out of trade. And then like, yeah, signpost more when you talk. So be like, here's their first contingent, here's what they say, now here's what we say. On their second contingent, just makes it easier. Yeah. Good job,
Thank you
guys.
very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
Yeah, you too.
He left his phone.
Oh, he did leave his phone recording.
It's still recording, yeah.
I'll go over it. You got it, was not? Did it? Well,